There is a moment in the life of every empath that looks terrifying from the outside, a moment when the person who once cared too much suddenly stops. They stop explaining, they stop fixing, they stop chasing, they stop absorbing everyone's pain, and the world looks at them and asks the same question, what happened to you? But what people don't understand is that this moment is not the empath becoming cold, it is the empath finally becoming whole, because the day the empath stops caring is usually the day they wake up. Most people think empaths are simply born kind, born sensitive, born compassionate, but the truth is more complicated. Most empaths didn't become sensitive because life was easy. They became sensitive because they had to survive emotionally, somewhere in childhood. They learned something very dangerous. They learned how to read the emotional weather of a room. Before anyone spoke, they already knew who was angry, who was sad, who was about to explode. Their nervous system became a radar, not because they wanted it, but because it was the only way to stay safe. And over time, this ability became their identity. They became the listener, the peacemaker, the emotional sponge, the one who absorbs pain so others don't have to feel it. But there's a silent cost to living this way, a cost that most empaths don't notice until much later. Because when you spend your life carrying everyone else's emotions, you slowly lose track of your own. Empaths often spend years believing their sensitivity is simply love, but eventually something strange begins to happen. They start feeling tired, not physically, but soul tired. Conversations feel heavy, certain people drain them, crowds overwhelm them, and slowly, a quiet resentment begins to form. Because deep down, they start noticing something painful. They are always the one giving, always the one understanding, always the one forgiving, but rarely the one being held, and this realization can break something inside. Because empathy without boundaries leads to emotional burnout and loss of self. And for many empaths, this burnout becomes the beginning of their awakening. Every empath has a moment when something inside them finally says, enough. It might happen after betrayal, after years of being taken for granted, after realizing someone they loved never truly cared about their well-being. And suddenly, the empath sees the pattern. They see how often they said yes when they meant no, how often they stayed silent to keep peace, how often they sacrificed themselves just to keep others comfortable. And once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. This is the beginning of psychological awakening. Not the soft spiritual kind people talk about, but the painful kind, the kind that forces you to confront the truth. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung believed something most people never realize. He believed that the goal of psychological growth is not to become nicer, or more agreeable, or more self-sacrificing. The goal is individuation. Individuation means becoming your true self by integrating all parts of your psyche. Even the uncomfortable ones, your anger, your boundaries, your shadow, because a person who only shows kindness is not whole. They are incomplete. And this is exactly where many empaths get trapped. They believe their value comes from being endlessly compassionate. But Jung warned that ignoring parts of yourself does not create goodness. It creates imbalance. And eventually, that imbalance demands to be corrected. When an empath begins waking up, something unexpected appears. Anger. Not explosive anger, but a quiet, powerful realization. The realization that they have spent years abandoning themselves. And this anger is not a sign of becoming a bad person. It is the psyche reclaiming lost energy. Because every time you suppress your boundaries, that energy does not disappear. It goes into the shadow. And when the shadow finally surfaces, it can feel like becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone less tolerant of manipulation, someone who no longer smiles just to keep peace. This is the stage many people misunderstand, because from the outside, the empath suddenly looks different, colder, more distant, more selective, but internally, something incredible is happening. They are learning the difference between empathy and self-betrayal. One of the first signs of an awakened empath is silence, not angry silence, not passive-aggressive silence, but intentional silence. They stop over-explaining themselves. They stop defending their boundaries. They stop trying to convince people to understand them. And this silence confuses everyone, because people were used to the old version of them, the version that tolerated everything. But now, the empath simply observes, and for the first time, they realize something shocking. Not everyone deserves access to their energy. Without boundaries, the psyche becomes porous, absorbing others' projections and demands, and once you understand this, your entire life begins to change. There is a stage of empath awakening that almost nobody talks about: loneliness. Because once you stop carrying everyone, many relationships quietly disappear. Some people only stayed because you were useful. Some people only stayed because you were easy to control. And when that dynamic ends, they disappear. At first, this can feel devastating, but slowly, a deeper realization appears. You were never losing people. You were losing roles: the fixer, the rescuer, the emotional caretaker, and without those roles, you finally get to meet yourself for the first time. Eventually, something beautiful begins to emerge. The empath does not become cold. They become clear. They still care, but they no longer bleed for everyone. They no longer try to save people from their own choices. They understand something powerful. Not every problem is theirs to solve, and this is where empathy evolves into something stronger. Discernment, the ability to feel deeply without drowning, the ability to love without losing yourself, the ability to care without carrying the weight of the world. This is what Jung called psychological wholeness, not perfection, but integration. The final stage of empath awakening is not dramatic. There are no fireworks, no grand announcement, just a quiet transformation. The empath who once chased validation no longer needs it. The empath who once feared disappointing people is no longer controlled by that fear. The empath who once carried everyone's emotions now carries only their own truth. And ironically, this is the moment they become most powerful, because their kindness is no longer desperate, their compassion is no longer exhausting, their presence becomes calm, grounded, unshakable. They no longer try to heal the world, but somehow their authenticity begins healing people anyway. So if you've reached the point where you feel yourself pulling back, caring less about drama, needing more space, more silence, more truth, you are not becoming heartless. You may simply be stepping into the most important stage of your life. The stage where empathy matures into wisdom, where sensitivity becomes strength, where your energy finally belongs to you. And this transformation may confuse people. Some may say you've changed. Some may say you're distant. Some may say you're not the same person anymore. And they're right. You're not. Because the person who once carried everyone else is finally learning how to carry themselves. And the strange part is, the day the empath stops caring about everything is often the exact day they finally begin living. And if something in this video resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you were the one carrying everyone's emotions, the one who understood everyone, but rarely felt understood yourself, then this channel was made for you. We explore the deeper side of human psychology, inspired by thinkers like Carl Jung, the hidden patterns behind empathy, awakening, and becoming your true self. So if you're on that journey, Make sure you subscribe and join us here. And I'm curious about something. Have you ever reached the moment where you simply stopped caring the way you used to? Not because you became cold, but because you finally chose yourself. If you've experienced that shift, write "I awakened" in the comments. I read every one of them, and you might be surprised how many people out there are walking the same path, quietly, just like you.